Are you thinking about adding North Macedonia to your travel list? Well, we're going to go over a few pros and cons of what it was like to slow travel throughout North Macedonia.
Hey, welcome. We are Joel and Michelle, and we're the Wandering Hartz. Now, we've been living an abundant life by slow traveling abroad since 2019. Actually, we've been traveling mostly through the US and Europe so far.
So today we're going to go over some of the pros and cons of living in North Macedonia from the perspective of full-time travelers, slow travelers, early retirees, or digital nomads who work online like we do.
Now, generally speaking, as slow travelers, we're basically spending 1 to 3 months both living, exploring, and also even working sometimes in the countries that we travel to. So in our case, we're actually traveling and creating content for our websites as well as our YouTube channel, like the one that you're probably watching this on right now. Now, this means, of course, that we're going to have a slightly different perspective as to an experience as to what the pros and cons are, right? Especially versus maybe what some of the locals might experience or even some of the expats might experience too.
So we recently spent 1 month slow traveling in North Macedonia, and that was actually on our way from Albania all the way to Bulgaria. And it was actually a really kind of nice, pleasant change for us to go to North Macedonia. It was a new country for us, and we actually really enjoyed our time there.
Yeah, so we had actually heard kind of some mixed reviews before we went, both from some other fellow travelers, as well as kind of reading stuff online. And so we kind of wanted to find out for ourselves just what it was like. And so like Michelle said, we really enjoyed our time there. And overall, we actually spent the bulk of our time both in Ohrid and as well as Skopje.
Yeah, so before we get into our pros and cons, we'd love for you to subscribe to our channel and also to sign up for our newsletter if you're interested in learning more about slow travel, living abroad, and we also send out a lot of travel tips as well, and that goes out every week.
So now let's go ahead and take a little closer look at what we consider the pros and cons to be of slow traveling in North Macedonia. Starting with the pros.
So first up is affordable cost of living. We found the food prices in North Macedonia to be really reasonable in the grocery stores and also dining out. So for example, our dinners out averaged around $20 for the both of us, and that included an entree, a drink, and tax and tip.
Yeah, so I mean, that's really good, especially looking at Western. I mean, we're from the US, so we're always going to judge everything according to US prices and even Western Europe prices as well. And another affordability factor we found too was the fact that long-term accommodations, or I should say short-term, like month-long stays in our case, were actually still relatively affordable as well. Maybe a little bit more than, say, in Albania or Bulgaria, where we've also spent some time, but still, nonetheless, they're still quite affordable.
Mhm.
Another pro is actually being able to communicate with people. And for us, that means English speaking. And there's actually quite a lot of people that speak English in both Ohrid as well as Skopje, which was obviously very good for us since we don't have a very good command of Macedonian, although it is fairly similar to, there's a lot of crossover with Bulgarian, so we were still able to use some of the few words of Bulgarian that we know when there was a little bit more of a communication issue. But overall, it was actually really easy to communicate with people.
Mhm. We also found the people to be really friendly and very hospitable as well. Our Airbnb host actually picked us up at the bus station and then drove us back when it was ready to go. So I thought that was very nice. We've never had that happen before. So
Yeah, so that was really nice of him.
yeah.
Another pro is safety. North Macedonia actually is a very safe country. It's got really low levels of violent crime. And in fact, it actually ranks 18th out of 44th countries in Europe for as far as crime rate goes overall.
Yeah, we actually felt really safe walking around. And even in Skopje, which is the capital city, we ended up, I think, walking back to our apartment at around midnight.
Oh, it's maybe almost closer to 2. We were walking back from a really nice little wine party with some friends.
Yeah,
So
and it was a good 30-minute walk, and there was still actually a lot of people out walking around, and we felt perfectly safe.
yeah, yeah, totally safe. So another pro for us as slow travelers is the fact that it's very centrally located, both in the Balkans, and it's also very accessible to the whole of Europe. You're really close to Bulgaria, Serbia, Albania, Bosnia Herzegovina, Greece, as well as Kosovo. You can all reach those by bus pretty easily. And of course, they also have the added benefit of being all non-Schengen countries too.
So next up is visa-free travel for United States citizens. So on arrival, we get 90 days out of 180. So that's also a really nice thing for people who have to deal with staying out of the Schengen zone. So you can go to North Macedonia and resets your time there. We do have some other videos as well on our channel about the Schengen area if you want to check those out.
Next is transportation. And now this one might be a little controversial from what I've seen with other people talking about. But we actually found transportation to actually be much, much better than a few of the other countries we've stayed in, specifically Albania. And maybe it's more on our mind because we had just come from Albania. But like the bus stations were actually easy to find. They're easy to navigate. It's not the same as much in certain parts of Albania. Also, there seem to be a lot more bus routes available to different parts of the country, as well as, like we mentioned, to like Serbia and Bosnia and those other places too. And you can actually book quite a few of them online, which is also really nice too.
Mhm. Next is food quality. And in our experience, I'd say most of Europe has pretty good food quality. And that is as well as in North Macedonia. All of the fruits and vegetables that we found were always really fresh. They were tasty. We ate lots of Shavska salads. And it was also extremely affordable compared to the United States. And there's also a good variety of meal options that we found as well, especially for vegetarians, which we were a little bit surprised about. So I think it's because they get a lot of Turkish tourists that come kind of through that area. I guess the only other caveat though to that is their burgers are
Yeah,
a little bit different from what we're used to.
yeah, their hamburgers are kind of different. They're kind of like a mix of like pork and beef. So
Yeah.
it's not what we would call a burger, but nonetheless, overall the food's great.
The food, yeah, we really liked the food, and also to the wine, which was a really pleasant surprise for us. Joel and I are both wine drinkers. I'm sure if you've seen on our channel, we've done a couple of wine tours in Bulgaria, and North Macedonia was amazing for wine. So we really enjoyed that as well.
So another pro is the grocery stores. We actually found there to be a lot more grocery stores available. A lot of them were more like the Western style. So they're not like just like a little hole in the wall somewhere where you never know what you're going to get. In this case, they were well stocked. You had a lot more options like Western style foods as well.
And the last pro is the beautiful landscape. So there's a lot to do outside in North Macedonia. There's tons of hiking. There's actually some skiing in the winter. And in the summer, there's boating, fishing, kayaking, ATV rides. There's wine tasting. So yeah, there's plenty to do outside. And it really is a beautiful landscape, especially when you're kind of driving through kind of the rolling hills and mountains. And there's also actually a national park too that's outside of Lake Ohrid.
If you're curious about how to embrace an abundant life through slow travel abroad, we'd love for you to check out our sister site, nomadicabundance.com.
Yep, we've created a hub filled with resources, guides, and exclusive content for our members. And it's all aimed at making your journey into slow travel as smooth and enjoyable as possible.
So now let's go ahead and talk about some of those cons. Again, this is from our perspective as slow travelers. First is going to be limited international flights. So most of your flights are going to be coming in, actually all of them are going to be coming in through Skopje, the capital. And there's actually only a few direct flights that actually come to North Macedonia from outside of Europe. And that would be just a couple from the US specifically. Most of your flights are going to be actually connecting through like Frankfurt or Vienna, especially if you're coming from the United States. Now, there are a lot of European flights that come in But they're mostly going to, a lot of them route through other airports, maybe even sometimes in Serbia or Istanbul.
Another con that we had, and this was kind of a big one for us, was mobile phone coverage. So we found out you're essentially getting mostly 3G service outside of Skopje. So our data just, yeah, was very limited and it just wasn't as fast as we needed it to be.
No, I mean, we used actually data with a couple different eSIMs as well. So we tried like 3 different eSIMs too, and we had pretty much the same, pretty similar results across all of those. So you want to be careful with that if that is going to be a concern for you. I mean, we were still getting enough for like emails and Google Maps and all that kind of stuff. But essentially, we were getting between like maybe 5 and 20 down, and then maybe zero point 0.5 and sometimes upwards of 20 megabytes per second upload too. So, and it wasn't very consistent at that.
Yeah, and that was in Ohrid.
Yeah, and then in Skopje, it was definitely more consistent in Skopje. I don't know if we ever got 5G, but I think I got to 4G at one point as well.
Yeah, we definitely had 4G coverage. It was a lot faster. So, and again, this might vary for you. We work online and we need to upload videos. So we need kind of a more robust internet. So for you, if you're retired or don't have as much like kind of content heavy um, stuff to do on the internet, it might not be that big of a deal for you.
So that brings us into actually the internet. So we're talking your internet at your accommodations and everything. So again, same thing here. Speeds can be hit or miss, although you can find much, much better speeds. It just like we saw stuff from like maybe 30 to 60 download and 30 or even a little bit more than 30 megabytes per second upload too. But it all really depends on the provider that you have. You definitely want to check your accommodations or check with your host ahead of time to make sure to see what they have. And so we always recommend asking for like a screenshot of the actual, have them do an actual speed test and then do a screenshot like the same day of that, just to make sure. Additionally, some of the home internet options are going to actually be like a mobile modem, which is where they use an actual SIM card. So like in the States, a lot of times they have like what is like the Verizon Fios or whatever, or even like the T-Mobile Home. It's the same kind of thing where it's literally just a SIM card in a modem. So you're just running off of like a 5G. Well, in this case, you're running off of the same thing, but it's like a 3G. And I got some pretty abysmal speeds there. Let's see, I think they were basically 1.5 to 1.5 up, which is really, really slow, and only about 10 or 15 megabytes down. And that was our experience at our accommodations that we were there. So it was enough to make like, for the most part, to make phone calls like through WhatsApp back home without it dropping out too many times. And then even we were able to make a few video calls without it being too bad. However, when we were in Skopje, we had a much, much better system. We were on a very good high-speed internet there. And I think the speeds were, they were actually really fast. They were really close to like 100, I think. So again, it can really depend on maybe where you're at in the country and as well as just what provider you've got hooked up to.
So moving on to our next con, and that would be the Cyrillic written language. So yeah, for us, obviously, as United States citizens, we're not very familiar with Cyrillic. So it can be a little bit different to read. It can make finding businesses and locations a little bit more difficult, reading menus, signs, but that can all be taken care of though by just using Google Translate, which we use a ton, and you just use your camera and you just hold it up to the menu that you're reading or any sign, and it generally does a pretty good job of translating.
Yeah, and I'll just add that if you just do a little bit of studying of the alphabet, you'll find that there's a handful of letters that are different, and you can start getting used to which ones, like backward, N's or like I's and like things like that. It's like you can start figuring out the patterns, and so you can kind of get a little better idea, like reading some of it. But yeah, it's definitely easier just to use your Google Translate because it can be kind of intimidating at first. So another con is the driving, and this is a common thing that we've experienced, and that's pretty much all throughout the Balkans. And if you're familiar with driving in the Balkans, it can be quite, if you're not familiar, rather, it can be quite an experience there. We've discussed this in some of our other videos, like our Albania pros and cons video. So it's very similar. I found them to be a little bit better than in Albania, but still it's kind of like people just overtake people just like at any time, on corners, like blind corners, you name it. So it can be a little intimidating. Now, when we were outside, like in Orhud, it wasn't too bad in the city there. Skopje was like hit or miss. Sometimes you'd see someone like trying to overtake a bus or something, like with oncoming traffic, and you're just like, why are you doing this? But yeah, so it's a little different. So just be prepared for that.
Next up is the weather. So from what we've seen, the winters can be pretty gray and cold there. We haven't spent time during the winter. Yeah. We were in Ohrid and Skopje in June, and it was actually pretty nice, though we did get a heat wave while we were there. So we do know the summers can get pretty hot and dry. So that's just, something to take into consideration.
Yeah, and I would just say if you're gonna be there in that season, it might be best to try to find a place with air conditioning, because we definitely ended up using it for a handful of the days that we were there. Yeah. All right, so next up is gonna be, this is more like specific to people that work remotely or who are like digital nomads, and that is the co-working. Co-working costs are kind of expensive there. At least we thought they were. We found costs anywhere from $150 to $200 a month for co-working, and I don't know. I just thought that's a lot of money for us. Maybe it's not for some places, but for two people, it just doesn't warrant us spending $300 to $600 or $400 a month just to that's like rent. Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe for you it's a different thing, but that's definitely outside of our budget. What co-works that we did see, though, I will say they had a lot of options available to them. And so like hot desks and private offices and things like that. And they, of course, had like socials and things. So it is good in that sense if you're looking for, maybe if you're a solo traveler or if you're looking for to get into the community or whatever. So that could be a good option. But for us, we just found it a con just because it was just maybe overpriced especially for considering the affordability of the country.
So I think that wraps it up for our pros and cons for North Macedonia. If you think that we missed something, let us know in the comments, or if you've been to North Macedonia as well, let us know. Or if you have any questions, we'll try and answer those. I think probably, as you can see, overall, we really enjoyed our time in North Macedonia, especially in Ohrid and in Skopje. And we know for sure that we will actually definitely be going back, probably for a month or two, we're thinking. At
least another month or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really good place to jump out, especially if you're trying to, looking for a place to go outside of Schengen. Mm-hmm. And if you're, again, if you're slow traveling like we do, then I definitely recommend putting it on your list.
If you found this episode helpful, make sure to give it a like and subscribe. It helps us out a lot, and our channel. Happy wandering.
Happy wandering.